Hello and welcome to today to Sustainapod, the podcast produced by young people for young people about the world of sustainability. My name is Hannah, and today I'll be co-hosting this episode with Noah, and we are delighted to invite Tanvi, the founder of Greenairy, as our guest on today's episode to talk about sustainable entrepreneurship and her experience trying to realize her ideas. Thank you, Tanvi, for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on a Sustainapod. So to get started, can you give our audience a quick introduction?
Thank you, Hannah, for the introduction. Hi, I'm Tanvi. I'm the founder of Greenairy, and we work on solutions for indoor air pollution and sustainability education.
So, Tanvi, as I said, it's such an honor to have you. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and I'm really hoping that our audience will get a lot out of this. So, just to start us off, you mentioned roughly what your company is about. Could you just give a little bit more detail as to what that company actually is at the moment and what stage of its life it's in, so that our audience can understand what your work currently entails?
I've been looking forward to this episode for a while as well. At Greenairy, we are a startup based in Singapore, and we build smart plant towers that can actually supercharge the plant's natural air purification abilities. So the issue with conventional air purifiers is that a lot of them have HEPA filters, some of them have activated carbon filters, but they are unable to effectively remove toxic gases such as formaldehyde, benzene, toluene, CO2, and especially in the long term. So a lot of these air purifiers, conventional air purifiers, they give out byproducts. Some of them give out CO2, for example. So we realized early on that plants were one of the only solutions that could purify the air without byproducts and long term. But we didn't know if they were able to do it at scale. So we started researching on how we could speed up the plant's natural air purification ability, and that's how Greenery came about.
Okay, so where did the idea of actually using plants for this come from? And I suppose also on that note, why did the issue of air pollution stand out to you? Because as you mentioned, there's a very justifiable reason to want to do this. But why did you specifically choose to look into it?
This goes back to my experience as when I was doing my bachelor's. So I was doing a robotics bachelor's, and when we had our projects, we were spending hours in the fabrication lab. So the lab had 3D printers, laser cutters, bandsaws, soldering machines. All of these machines were giving off toxic gases, and none of us even realized. So there were pumps to remove air, but there were no purifiers in that space. And my best friend, she actually even fainted and went to the hospital. Of course, we were overworked. That's part of the reason. But that kind of got us thinking about how much of an unseen health hazard indoor air pollution really is. And that's where we started researching into the conventional solutions for indoor air pollution. We realized then that the conventional air purifiers they have to go through a chemical reaction. So if you want to use technology to remove this toxic gas, you have to turn it from one pollutant, do a chemical reaction, and finally you have a byproduct that is less harmful. But this is still not the ideal way to remove pollution in an indoor space. And that's how we started looking at plants. And I think the way that we got confidence to continue working on plants was because we realized that the body of research around plant-based air purification was huge. So there was research coming in from all parts of the world on this topic, and we realized that this is a very promising area that we should also look into.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. If I can just follow up one more bit on what you were mentioning about the disposal of pollutants. So you were mentioning that plants offer a way of removing these toxic gases from the air without creating harmful byproducts such as carbon dioxide and etc. But obviously, when these plants remove it from the air, it doesn't disappear forever. So what is the thinking behind? Okay, we've used plants to take these pollutants out of the air. what happens next in your company's idea of how this is used?
Yeah, that's a good question that you have asked. So it's actually the microbes that are taking up these pollutants. They actually use the pollutants as food. So there is actually a source of nutrition for them, and then they work symbiotically with the plants to give them nutrition as well. So in this way, the pollution actually does not have any is removed without any byproducts by the microbes. So this is a process, it's like, I always think about it as, in the forest when the leaves fall and then the microbes get to work decomposing it into things that are usable for the rest of the ecosystem again. In that same way, this is what is happening with the microbes in our system, like in the plants in general. Yeah, and it's nature's own way of removing, like, it's like when you step into the forest, you know that the air is clean because plants have that innate ability to clean the air with both oxygen and with removing the chemical toxic chemical gases. So we just harness it and supercharge it.
Okay, that's thank you for that very clear explanation. Last follow up on that on this note, I promise. You've been using the word supercharge quite a lot to refer to what you're doing to these plant processes, because as I'm sure we all know, a single plant cannot purify a large amount of air particularly quickly, and you're suggesting using this in offices, and maybe even in industrial spaces, as with your inspiration. So I suppose without revealing any trade secrets, what's the best explanation you can give as to how you can supercharge a plant?
Yeah, the technology behind it, right? So we can supercharge with our plant towers. We can supercharge a plant's natural air purification ability by 10 to 100 times, and without revealing too much, we do it, since we're in the process of IPing as well. We do it by creating the ideal conditions for the plants. So plants purify. It's just like how plants grow well in certain levels of lighting, certain levels of water. In the same way, there are 6 conditions that affect the air purification ability of plants, and we have researched it and we create these ideal conditions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Noor.
And on to the next question. What would you say are the long-term goals that you have for Greenairy?
So I've been testing air quality around the world with our air quality monitor, and I've been noticing trends in terms of where the pollution is mostly. There are certain types of profiles of offices, there are certain profiles of countries where the pollution is higher. And our goal with Greenairy is really to get our air purifying plant towers into the places that need it the most. So, salons, maker spaces, factories, co working spaces, hotels, confinement hotels. These are all spaces where we have noticed that either it's that human health matters a lot, there are vulnerable populations in these areas, or there's a huge creation of toxic gases in these areas. So, we want to tackle that with our solution. On the other hand, we also want to launch our sustainability education app with a partnership with schools. And together with that, we also have been working on a microgreen tower so that kids can have a greater connection with nature and experience growing their own greens. I'm sure all both of you would have experienced like the school class experiment where you grow like a bean or other small vegetables, and you, if you remember the joy that brought about in you, we just want to bring that joy to more kids.
That's a very interesting way of trying to inspire people to take part more in sustainability. And I think that's one of the most original and probably compelling ones that I've heard in quite a while. So yeah, I love that idea. So obviously, in order to make greenery a thing and to grow your idea into the startup it is now, and hopefully grow it a lot further, that doesn't happen overnight. And you need people, you need effort, and you need funding.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I suppose, and what most people do in that situation, as our audience I'm sure knows, is that you pitch it to various boards of people to try and see if they will support you in your idea. So could you just talk us through some of the experiences that you had with pitching your idea, and if there were also any other ways that you approached getting the funding and the backing that you needed to bring Greenairy into existence?
Yeah, you're so spot on. Like, I've pitched Greenairy so many times at so many different events, both in Singapore and outside. And it's always, an iterative process. I always have to change up the deck a little bit to cater to what the problem statement is about. But overall, I think I would say, one, I'm very grateful for my team. So they each have their own skill sets that really contribute to the development of both the product and the pitch, even the social media, things like that. Regarding the funding and the pitching process, we have been very lucky, and we are very grateful that we are in an ecosystem like Singapore, where there is because we align with their current focuses as well. We have been able to tap on some government grants and funding. We also have competition money, funding from through competitions. But I think this whole process of pitching and getting money is very tiring, very time consuming. So I think something that I've learned is to learn when to say no as well, because it's very tempting to just apply for things as they come about. So usually I will look at online platforms to find these opportunities, or I will look at, for example, the school entrepreneurship groups. I will look at bigger youth entrepreneurship groups, youth platforms where they share opportunities, and sometimes even global websites where they will share like either fellowships or grant funding opportunities. So I think one tip that I definitely have for people who are starting out in this space is to, one, grow iteratively. So at the start, definitely we were looking for smaller levels of funding, and as we grew, we started applying for bigger amounts of funding. Also, one thing I've noticed is like having the physical prototype there makes a huge difference, because once we started bringing that into the pitches, that really it made the judges and the audience know that this is a real thing that we have already built and worked so hard on. And there will always be very interesting questions about the technology about it as well. And I think also always starting off with the problem. So we always start our pitches with the context. So we say, indoor air pollution is the biggest environmental health risk according to the WHO. Maybe this is something that a lot of people don't know, but starting off with the problem makes it clear how you are specifically making an impact on the world.
Yeah, thank you for that very comprehensive answer. I will just say that I have listened to some other episodes done by other people on this podcast, and your story about bringing things in person reminded me of an interview that Paku did with some other students who've gone on to start a company based out of London, and they were talking about how they bought a bale of hay on the tube to a pitching competition, and that was and the fact that they bought a bale of hay on the London Underground was what won them a lot of funding. So yeah, that's some really valuable advice. So thank you very much for that.
I've been really enjoying listening to the past episodes as well, especially since you focus on youth and sustainability. I think that these are really important topics to be talking about. But yeah, on that note, like bringing something physical always helps. Something small as well. I think it helps to hook onto your idea.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. I also have just a very small question, but I wanted to ask, what did you enjoy most while pitching for Greenairy?
What I enjoy most, at this, I think at this point I don't get stressed about pitching anymore. Like I've done it so many times. Like I know it like the back of my hand. But what I enjoy most is connecting with people afterwards, because usually after the pitches we will have a chance to mingle with the audience, and there'll always be people who are so interested, and then they'll be like, oh, can I have one for my house, or let me connect you with someone who might be interested in this, or can I know more about the technology, or which plants should I buy for my house? It's always so fun to hear about the thoughts and how people have connected with our pitch. So that's usually the best part. I mean, if we get funding, then that's really great as well. But yeah, during the pitches itself, this is the part that I enjoy a lot. Also, getting questions from the judges. I feel like the sometimes the questions are really hard, and I really enjoy the process of, like, being on stage, being put on the spot, and having to quickly come up with the answer.
That sounds like a lot of interesting things to do. Um, then, what would you say are the major challenges you faced along your journey of building a green startup?
I would say there are two major challenges. So one is, because we're a hardware product, of course, the technical challenge is the biggest challenge. So getting the product from just a prototype, or from getting it from the concept to the prototype is one jump, and then getting it from the prototype to something that's manufacturable is another huge jump that requires a lot of um, investment. It requires a lot of planning. It requires you to really commit to your design. So right now we have been going through this iterative process of, like, improving our prototypes so that we know that the final product that we manufacture is the one that we can really commit to. We won't have issues with it later, because every time we do our pilots, we'll get some feedback, and then we'll go back and improve it in our prototypes. So I think that for hardware prototype has been really challenging. One thing that I would advise others who are also working on hardware prototypes is to look if you can, for the early stages, think about also building up iteratively and starting with retrofitting existing solutions just for proof of concept, because we started to with having our own, like, making our own 3D models, our own CADs, etc., and then trying to improve on that. But if we had started with retrofitting existing something similar, then, like, for example, a hydroponic tower, and retrofitting it with certain parts of our technology, then maybe we would have learned the lessons a lot faster than just starting everything from scratch. Yeah. And the second challenge, to your question, is, of course, on the business side, on convincing people about the technology. So I think with something this new, there's always a bit of resistance, and there's a lot of education needed on the benefits of our product compared to the conventional products. Because I think a lot of people, they think that we have been buying air purifiers all this time, and everyone buys air purifiers, and what how can you prove that your plants are going to purify the air? It's not a commonly heard of topic. But I think to overcome that, we show them our live lab results. We show them the results of the air quality testing that we're doing before and after the tower was introduced. And we also try to show them how, like, the conventional air purifiers with the dust PM 2.5 filters are just not effective, because dust levels in most urban areas indoors are not reaching toxic levels, unlike the gases, which are the major pollutants.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point actually about the convincing people to get on board with it. And I'd just like to probe your knowledge here, that because obviously you're very familiar with having to try and sell this idea to people. Obviously, a lot of the environmental and sustainability challenges that are faced around the world, the key, or the biggest step to solving them, is convincing people to take
Yeah.
action, convincing people that there is a problem and that it's worth investing time and money and making the sacrifices for.
Yes.
And air pollution is probably one of the less heard of ones. So if the major issues such as climate change are more heard of and more media popularized, than
Yeah.
air pollution, which is arguably just as big or even a bigger threat, are struggling to get attention, it seems that there would be a lot of, you'd face a lot of opposition in trying to get this idea into the public. But at the same time, as of late, I believe that air pollution is on people's radar more. Recently, we had Delhi being reclassified as the world's most polluted city for air pollution. So do you think that there is actually progress being made in the public and the worldwide and governmental consensuses, or is it still like talking to a brick wall?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good observation that you have made. Absolutely, I have been seeing a lot more public awareness of this issue, maybe specifically on outdoor air pollution. But the number of challenges that I've been seeing regarding indoor quality monitoring or outdoor air quality monitoring have been on the rise. And I think the general public awareness, at least in Singapore and in Asia, has also been on the rise. So people have been reaching out to us actually about, oh yeah, we are concerned about the air quality in our office. Some of our staff is getting sinus, or there is higher risk of flu spreading between our staff because of the air quality not being circulated well enough, or the air quality being stale in this room, and can you tell us more about your solution? So I would say definitely, as more people move indoors due to climate change as well, more people will be spending more time indoors in urban areas. And secondly, because of the increasing demand for good health after COVID especially, I would say that the awareness for indoor air pollution and the need for good indoor air quality has definitely been on the rise. I think legislation is another thing that also affects this, because in Singapore, a lot of buildings have been aiming to get the green building certification, and it's something that the government is also aiming for a certain level of companies to have in a few years. So I think that's also another push for companies to get a solution like ours and to improve their air quality in general.
Hannah, it's okay. She'd already answered the question I was going to answer. I was going to ask next.
Ah,
Sorry.
So then I'll move on to asking my question. Um, how have you addressed skepticism towards the impact or viability of your projects?
sorry.
How have you addressed skepticism towards the impact or viability of your projects?
Mm, I think with air pollution, like as I said earlier, it's a unseen health hazard, right? So I think making that unseen hazard seen has been very important. So we bring our air quality monitor actually everywhere we go, and we also, what's that? We have also started doing air quality testing for offices in Singapore, because that's the best way for them to see that they do have a problem. And with those, I think there are two parts. When we do the air quality testing, we usually have our air quality monitors in the space, and we also have a small note like, oh, we are doing air quality testing. And if you have any feedback on the air quality of this space, please drop it on this note. And there have usually been responses on the note like, oh yeah, this place is stale, stuffy, or it's a bit too humid, it has a smell. So I think showing these reports to officers definitely is the best way for us so far to make them aware of the problem.
Thank you. That's, you know, it's a very human way of doing that, I think, just to try and make humans respond best to when they see a problem right in front of them, when they can sense that problem around them. So making that really visible and apparent. That's a really wise way of doing it. Thank you for sharing that with us. I was wondering if I could just take us on a very slight diversion for a little bit. And you've been talking about lots of different steps that you've been taking. So the iterative process that your design team have gone through, and the massive amount of logistics and effort that goes into the back end of a startup with the pitching process and gathering all this data and researching how it can be used. And I wanted to ask, what is your approach to getting to optimizing your team structure and the resources that you have available to you, mainly in terms of people, in order to accomplish that goal.
Right. Yeah, I think the team structure and having the right people on your team is the biggest multiplier of your own efforts, the biggest sign of whether you'll be successful in the long term. So I would say the process that I've gone about is I think I trust my team and I give them opportunities to take full responsibility of something. I think I found that has been something that has been very important because in the start I used to be a lot more like, okay, you can join me and I'll take the lead and you can just contribute in whatever way possible. But I found that when I trust my team and I ask them to get certain tasks done, I think it's a better sense of ownership and accomplishment for them. And it's also I built my trust in the team as well. But of course, on the other flip side, there are instances when maybe certain teammates don't perform to the right level. In that case, I try to be efficient and maybe reduce my level of working with certain teammates and try to look for other teammates to work with instead. I think I try to align also with what my teammates find valuable. So if they are in it, I mean, most of the team, they are in it because they believe in the vision and the impact that this product can make. But of course, practically, there are also other benefits of joining this project, and I try to always align and make sure that I want the best for them and I can align with their other practical goals as well in terms of their portfolio or in terms of like pitching opportunities. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a you're really highlighting to us the importance of having good, reliable, and trustworthy people.
Absolutely.
Yes, and the way a lot of these, linking to that idea, I suppose, having good people comes a lot from these people's backgrounds, and so on that note of people's backgrounds and their educations and careers that have gotten them to the point where you and your team are, could you just share a little bit about, with your journey, what factors within your education and career do you think steered you onto the path you're on the most?
Yeah, that's a good question. The As I mentioned earlier, I was doing my robotics bachelor's. I think that was the time where I gained the skills to even be able to prototype and build hardware products because at SUTD we were very active. If especially if you enjoy product design, there were a lot of opportunities to join hackathons, competitions, and even in school we had a lot of opportunities to build our own like prototypes and products. So I think that was something that gave me confidence to start building hardware products. And secondly, it was also where I found the problem, like me and my best friend, we found the problem of indoor air pollution to be a big problem. So I think if not for that, I would not have, if I had not experienced it, I would not have known how bad it was. And then after that, I was very lucky to get an amazing Prof. Lucian Blessing, as my master's thesis professor. So I decided to do a master's on this topic so that I could really focus and give it a chance to see if our technology could speed up the air purification process of plants. So it was a big question mark for me at the start. Although there was a lot of research from around the world, but they were all in silos. So it would be like, oh, how does the water flow, moisture level affect this plant's air purification? How does this plant perform at removing specifically formaldehyde? So there were a lot of pieces of research, but they were all over the place. So I wanted to see if we could bring that together, do the optimization, bring in the right plants, etc., and actually have a product that effectively speeds up the air purification. So it was kind of a gamble for me, but I knew that if I had directly gone into work, I would have regretted not giving this a chance. So that's why I went to do my master's thesis on design engineering under Prof. And at the end, luckily, it we found out that the product did work and it did supercharge the air purification. It worked better than conventional air purifiers, and that's what gave me the confidence to even start a startup.
Hey, and for the people that you are working with now, I mean, obviously a lot of them, I suppose you will have been actively involved in recruiting and
Mm,
finding.
yeah.
Yeah. When you're finding these people to work alongside you, I mean, you got your inspiration through your academic research, through your postgraduate studies. But is that what you look for in the people that you try and find to work alongside you, or do you look for something slightly different to complement your skills?
I would say, skills wise, I definitely look for teammates who are have a growth mindset regarding whichever skills that they are working on. Sorry. So if they are actively seeking to grow in the areas that they are currently working on, and that's always a really great sign for me, even if they are starting out as because a lot of my teammates they're students as well. So it's a growth process for both of us. So for one of my teammates, like she's working on the social media side because that's honestly Gen Z social media. Like you guys know it best. I don't think I can. No, she's always telling me like, "Oh, this is the current trend on Reels or TikTok," and I'm just like very impressed by that kind of knowledge. And I think it's a very powerful skill. Like storytelling is such a powerful skill to have. So yeah, whenever we work together, it's like she's figuring things out. And I'm also learning from her. So I think it's good to have teammates who have that kind of learning mindset. Versus, I think when I briefly worked with teammates who didn't, who yeah, who are just like happy to um, maybe not go out of their comfort zone. Then it was quite difficult working with them. Yeah, and I also look for what's the other. Also, one is their skills, their growth mindset. Secondly, is their alignment with our vision. So, do they see this? Do they have the confidence that this can make impact? And I think that's the biggest reason a lot of them join us. And then lastly also whether they are proactive. I think a lot of my teammates they will find opportunities and they will say, oh, maybe we can think about this or we can work on this is a potential area of interest. And I think that kind of energy is something I value a lot because I mean I am it being a founder is a very lonely journey. So when you have teammates who care about your building this thing enough to also be proactive and find opportunities, I think that gives you a lot of motivation as well. So yeah, I think these are the three things that I've been looking out for.
I agree that it's really important because it's like you're supposed to build a community and you get to learn and share things with each other. So yes, and going on to the next question about mentorship. I've heard that you've also volunteered and participated in a lot of mentorship programs as well. Can you share some of your experience with mentorship, either as a mentor or mentee?
I'm so grateful for our mentors that we've had so far. A lot of them really changed the trajectory and direction of Greenairy. So I think in the early days, for example, we had one mentor. Our first product, actually, like just to backtrack a little bit, our first product was very simple. We just added a small, cute face, like a smiley face slash a sad face, onto a plant pot to raise awareness. That was our only goal after experiencing the indoor air pollution ourselves. We just wanted to raise awareness. So we added this face to a plant pot and it was called Bud. So at that stage when we were pitching this for competition, we had a mentor who was like, can you think bigger? Instead of just showing people about the air quality, can you actually do something to purify the air? Because what is someone going to do if they're in an office and they see that their plant face is sad all the time? It's not like they can open the window or they can bring in an air purifier. It's not like they have the agency to do any of these things themselves in an office setting. So he was the one who kind of got us even thinking about how we could use alternative methods of air purification, and that's where we got into specifically plants, and that's how Greenairy grew. And even recently, we've had an amazing mentor, Chris, who has been advising us on the in urban farming space for kids in Singapore. So as we build our microgreen product, and I think recently had a session, we were supposed to discuss our microgreen product, but it ended up being more like a coaching session. He was like, "What do you really want? Where do you see this product going? What are your goals?" I think, yeah, we wouldn't have gone on this journey if not for all the amazing mentors along the way. I think there's like a big, what I've realized now that I value the most in mentorship is not specifically the kind of mentorship that's like, maybe at the early stage, I think the kind of mentorship that's like, oh, change your slides to be like this, were very valuable. But at this stage, it's like more of the bigger landscape kind of mentorship that we have been finding very valuable. And yeah, in regards to me being a mentor as well, I think one hand, as I mentioned, a lot of my teammates are younger, they're students, so mentoring them and telling them, giving them opportunities, telling them my own experiences in terms of career growth has been one form of mentorship. In I always prioritize, actually, yeah, I always prioritize their growth over like them staying in Greenairy actually. And then secondly, I've also been mentoring younger youth who have been working in sustainability related projects. For example, recently I mentored a group of girl guides who are running their own thrift shop swap project in school. That was really fun, and I think interacting with the younger people who are doing these kind of projects and care about sustainability is also very enjoyable for me to, I feel empowered, yeah, when I talk to them.
Yeah, it's a really powerful thing to be able to have such a great impact on so many people's lives while just staying within, the expertise that you have built for yourself, and it's
Yeah.
a really effective thing for, I'm sure, the mentees as well. On that note, I mean, you've mentioned that you've worked with lots of youth projects, all the way up to young people who are trying to follow the same path that you have done of creating a startup. And as we've discussed notes along this path, or notes about this already earlier, but are there any particular things that you think young people who want to start a sustainability project, want to start a sustainability startup, want to have an effect or something entrepreneurial along those lines? Is there something that you think these people need to realize that isn't actually discussed enough?
That's a really great question. And I guess I'll think about what are things that I had known when I was younger and starting out. Last week I was at the Earthshot Prize Youth Program, and I got to speak to so many amazing young youth from Asia and Africa who are working on their own sustainability related projects, either in innovation or in advocacy, in waste management, in education. So there were two themes that came up for me as I was speaking to the youth, and also as I was speaking to a few of the nominees and the prize winners. That was so inspiring for me. So I think the two things were, one, the power of community. I think it's, that quote goes like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So I think enabling other people to join your cause and to build a community around that is always a very powerful way to scale up your impact. We were speaking to this one, like last year's Earthshot winner, Florent Kaiser, who was sharing how he empowered the indigenous communities to plant millions of trees. I think 24 million or 20 million trees in their community by just tapping on their reciprocity principles. So it's like giving back to the earth. They already have that innate energy to care for the earth. And then eventually, this built like a whole community who was working together to plant trees. secondly, we were also speaking to Gaio from Africa, who was working on diverting waste away from the landfills, and they have a huge community of waste pickers that they empowered as well. So I think one is think about how you can build a community around your project to scale your impact, even if it's within your like finding friends who want to work with you on your project, or finding teammates from outside your school to work on your project together with you, because they're always, I feel like after all the youth projects I've programs I've been through, I realized there are so many youth with the energy and the passion to want to do something for the environment. And then I think the second thing is you will fail, like you will fail multiple times, and what really determines whether you will succeed at the end is whether you give yourself, like whether you give yourself the grace to fail and get back up and try again. So I think I was reading an article about how even James Dyson, he was working on this for like either 4 or 6 years, and he had like 5,000 prototypes that he was working on. And I think about that often because, it's the story that we see is like the end, like, wow, he's so successful. That's amazing. He innovated this product. And that goes for so many innovators. When we hear about them, it's like, wow, it's so incredible that they got to this stage. But what we don't see is how many times they had failed before this. So every time I fail, I think about that. If I want to, every failure is a step closer to success. Yeah. But also, I think to acknowledge, I think that ability to be able to fail multiple times is also a privilege. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it's understanding that if you've got an idea, don't be afraid of failing, because if you're going to fail anyway, not starting the first place is itself a failure. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's something that gets said a lot to people that are people around me when they're like applying for things that they're very unlikely to get, is if you're going to get
Yeah.
rejected from something, at least don't reject yourself.
Exactly.
And
It's
I
like,
suppose it really plays into that idea of just have some faith, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't. You're still you at the end of the day. So yeah,
you
really.
miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So going on to our next question. If you could become a student again, what would you want to be exposed to learn about sustainability? What do you think would help you learn more about sustainable careers when you were younger?
Oh, this is a great question because it ties into the app that we're developing as well, and it gives me a moment to reflect on the things that should be on there. I think, especially being in a urban city like Singapore, there's a huge disconnect with not just nature but a lot of other sustainability topics and the impacts of our action. So that's something that I want to bring to students, and I wish I had known as well when I was younger. So it's like, for example, that I heard a student say the other day, food comes from the supermarket. That's a huge misconception, and I think if you don't have the exposure to understand where these things come from, we can't expect youth to value the resources that they have if they don't understand how much work and resources went into even building, growing these items, building these items, making these items. So I think if I was a student again, I would want that type of exposure. So it's not just about learning the practical topics like math and science, but I feel like these topics, and that exposure to the world are equally important. In fact, more important to know our place in the society and to know what you want to specifically work on as well, and also to get more students involved in sustainability. So I think like sometimes just a simple video and seeing the impacts of like, oh, if I keep buying clothes from Shein, then one, there are these people who are being underpaid to make my clothes, and there are impacts long term because they are ending up in huge clothes dumping sites. So just a simple video like this can make an impact on how their future consumption habits change. So I would say, yeah, this type of over bigger exposure, especially for those of us who live in the city. Because my parents are from India, and I used to visit India every year. And seeing the stark difference in the way our lives are being lived, and also the connection with the impacts of the action. Like Singapore is very clean, you don't see all of that. But whenever I went back to India, it was a stark reminder that our actions have impacts, and they are affecting people, they're affecting the planet, and they're affecting other living beings as well. So I think, yeah, just that exposure would be something that I would want from a young age.
I think quite beautifully ties into what you were talking about earlier with your product. That not only your app, but that idea of showing, putting an example of your air purification in those plants into people's classrooms. I do agree that it's very stark. I, for several years, lived in the middle of a farming village, and you would see the massive impacts of the modernized farming practices on the local community. And then when I moved into a semi urban community, and there was just such a massive dissonance between how people talked about the food and the land and the air, compared to what it's like to live in the areas that are really affected by it. So I think that's a really valuable thing that you're trying to do. For me, I suppose there's just one more question, and it's a bit more fun, I suppose. Earlier on, when you were talking about what you were pitching, you mentioned that you get asked loads of questions after a pitching session. One of the questions that you said that you got was, "What plant should I buy for my room?" So,
Yes.
what plant should we buy for our rooms?
Good question. Okay. I would say, okay, these are the five of the plants that we use in our towers, but just to caveat that one plant alone is not going to make an impact. But I mean, if you want to have something there, then it's better that you at least have something that is purifying the air. So I would say pace lily, spider plant, money plant, dragon plant, snake plant. These are the five that we recommend. They are very hardy, and they also purify the air. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Noah and Hannah, for your amazing
Yeah.
questions. Yeah. And sharing your experiences as well.